So just fading out Billie Holiday there because it is past and time to talk to Rupert Guenther. Good morning, Rupert.
Hi, Penny. Thanks for having me on.
You are very welcome. I've already given you a bit of an introduction, but in case anyone's just tuned in, you describe yourself as a new type of violinist composer specializing in imaginative improvisation. So tell us how you got to kind of basically invent a new sort of job.
Yeah, I guess so. Look, it's always been, I think, deep in my heart somewhere to make my own music, and it's just been a series of events that conspired to connect me with how to do that about 20 years ago. And since then, I've enjoyed a bit like a painter. I like to make the connection with the way painters work. You know, if you meet a painter, you go to their studio and they have blank canvases, and they would, using their imagination or some sort of model or still life, whatever, they then paint that or interpret that in their own way onto the canvas. And it's a similar thing, the way I work. I guess I have a lot in common with composers in that I produce my own works, but the difference is that I do it through improvisation, which is a little bit more like having a conversation, I guess, because it's in the moment.
And of course, it's not repeatable. So a composer would generally compose something and then write it down, and then other people could do it, whereas yours are much more ephemeral.
Well, they're much more peculiar to me in that sense. I can reproduce works in a similar sense to if you went on a holiday and you went to some wonderful places, you came back and your family wanted to hear about it, and you'd tell them, you know, the places you went, things you saw, and then you might see some music colleagues the next day, and they'd say, "Hey, Penny, how was it? Where did you go?" and all that, and you'd tell them. You're not trying to use the same words. You're not even trying to tell the story in the same order, perhaps, but you're definitely conveying what you saw and what you experienced. So in that sense, I'm quite compositional. I have very specific things in mind when I'm playing. They're very specific ideas. They're about this, for instance, this new Letters to Esterhazy, with these letters to Haydn. That's something quite specific. Or if I'm performing a piece about the cosmos, and it's all about the stars at night, the sky. All of these things, they give you particular emotions to work within the bandwidth of, and so in that sense it is duplicatable, but it will. You're right, quite right. It will not be the same every time by any stretch. It would be always a variation on that. Thematically, no, there's not any themes that you can hub along with that you heard last time. So,
and you couldn't give something to another violinist and say, "This is my piece. Now you can play it."
Well, interestingly, I can.
Oh.
And I have done that at the Guildhall School in London, where I was about 12 years ago. Oh, actually, it's 15 years ago now. Time flies. I composed a piece for saxophone and percussion, and I gave them this story, and the story was the script, and they just had to interpret that in sound in their own way. And so I can do that. I can say, here's the script, imagine the stars from this perspective. Now go tell that story in A minor, So I can actually pass that on to other people, but it will always be in our own voice. And that's actually the plus side of it. I think that's a lovely thing that no one can really duplicate what someone else has done. And that then opens the door to what's unique about that person, the way that they tell the story.
So tell me about New Letters to Esterhazy.
Okay, well, Joseph Haydn, who we all know as this wonderful musician who really transitioned music into the classical period, and which then gave birth to people like, musically, to people like Beethoven and Mozart and Beethoven. Joseph Haydn was the court musician at the court of Esterhazy, which was Prince Nicholas Esterhazy in the and the Esterhazy court ran in the 16th, 17th, 18th centuries, and in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and Haydn was the musician there. And I've been down to those castles, and I've been to the halls where he premiered his works, and I've wandered around the village, and I've been to his little house, and it's quite an experience to go and kind of touch those same stones in the street and dining tables. And Haydn, so this was, Haydn spawned into the world this new epoch in music, in sound, and I think humanistic ideals in the same way that the ancient Greeks did and Mozart did in his opera, and so did Beethoven in their works. And the new letters to Esterhazy they're imaginary letters from me in 21st century Australia back to Joseph Haydn saying, I wouldn't be where I am now without you. It has been the most fantastic thing that you've started, and, you know, I'm still over here. There's some of us still carrying that torch, you know, for humanity hundreds of years later, thousands and thousands of kilometres across the other side of the globe.
Wow, yes, that is definitely something to think about. And this is the start. You're starting your national tour in Perth at Government House, and on the 30th of June. And just give us a brief rundown of where else you're going.
Yes, well, the tour starts in Perth, as you said, at Government House Ballroom, that beautiful room. It'll be in all the major capitals. We go to Melbourne and Canberra, Sydney, Brisbane, Adelaide. Hobart will probably be later in the year. We haven't got that connected yet, but it's a six capital concert tour in all the beautiful halls: Sydney Opera House, Melbourne Recital Centre, etc. And yes, I'm really excited about that, sharing the music across Australia, because it's new.
Yeah, and during the concert, do you introduce each piece as you go?
Well, I'm still wondering about this, whether to have a printed program or not, or whether to say something or not. The sonata itself, New Letters to Esterhazy, was born of actually the ABC invited me to come and record for a few days in Melbourne at the Iwaki Auditorium back in 2007, and I ended up with 5 albums of music. Some of these were the New Letters to Esterhazy, and some were piano and violin sonatas, some were for ensemble. And so to take these out on the road, to give people some kind of understanding of what I'm doing, I think is important, because it's more of a journey, you know, and I think that's the important thing of all the program notes. Yes, the 5 movements represent 5 letters, but because there's not a theme that you can come back to and hum along with. It's not that sort of music. It's a real journey you just go into, and you come to the end of that journey, and then there's the next one. So if people have that understanding and that expectation, then I think it's a lot more, they're more able to participate and engage in that way.
Yeah, so more of an immersive experience than a kind of classic chat, play.
Yeah, it's still very classical in all the sounds and the tones, and it's very rich in that way. It really draws on that heritage of sound that I was trained in, but it's very much an immersive thing. It's probably a lot more in common with some of the Eastern traditions of music, like Indian classical music and Persian classical music, where sometimes there's a theme, but a lot of times it's really up to the artist to create an atmosphere. Because music's all about feelings and atmosphere. It's not really about the themes. The themes are just for the cup to put it in. But really, when you put music on, it's because it takes you to a place and puts you in touch with certain feelings that you're probably not able to access without the music, something that you really treasure. And the way that this music works is no different. It's definitely a very atmospheric and very evocative, and in different ways for all the different parts of the music. So it's not just a rambling improvisation of nothing doodling. It's very, very, very powerful music in the way that we enjoy music to be. But it is improvised, and that's my own interpretation. So putting people in that picture, I think, is probably the most helpful thing, because I can't really tell them much more about it.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And sometimes it's nice, as you say, to leave it to the imagination. And I find it such a fascinating thing about the human brain, that sounds that we can hear evoke emotions and pictures. When my kids were little, I used to, if I was in the car and I'd have Classic FM on, and I'd say, sometimes if a piece of music was on, I'd say, what are you thinking? What do you think this is? And they always had an answer. It might be a forest, or you're sitting in a window looking out the window at the snow, or, they have something and they don't know why.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? And you've put your finger right on the button there, Penny, because I think the way I make the music is the same process, but from the other side. So if you reverse that, I'll take a snowy vista, and then I'll be finding the notes that convey that, or I'll be thinking about 17th century Vienna. What am I, certain things won't cut it. They won't fit into that emotional picture, so they're discarded. And so it's really, and we're quite instinctive as musicians in this. We've spent all our life with that sort of nuance, so it's not difficult. And it's really just about following the breadcrumbs, following the music as it moves, to tell this story. So,
yeah, you say it's not difficult, but I am also a musician, and I think I would find that very difficult. If somebody said, go on, improvise an aria, I'd be like, wait, what? No, I'm not doing that.
You would if someone just said improvise an aria, but if someone said improvise an aria based on this story of this person, who searched all over the world for their missing loved ones, and finally 40 years later finds them, and some of them have died but two remain, and there's the emotions start to really surface, and I think with as we give ourselves more freedom to explore those sorts of things musically, and not be so confined by our own expectations, and to some degree criticism. And I'm only saying this not towards you, but to us as classical musicians in general. I think everyone's terrified of that sort of thing, and I think it's a great statement. I'm hoping through, with the cultural change that we can slowly bring through education and in the profession, that those big barriers begin to crumble, and people do feel much more supportive of each other to explore different ways of making music and having a go, and seeing that life is a process, and music's no different, because we've had this huge emphasis through the advent of recorded music in the last century, where there's this idea of perfection, but actually perfection is being able to move people. And if a note goes wrong or something, it's actually not the music that's causing anybody to lose concentration. It's people's reaction to that, because they have an expectation that nothing should be out of place. Well, if the emotion's in place, I would say, I think our job is pretty done. You probably, if you had anything to do with kids making music, sometimes it's some of the most refreshing music to listen to. There's mistakes everywhere, but their love of the tune or making music is so powerful.
It's so true. I often think that it's not the mistake that's a problem. It's people's the performer's reaction to the mistake that then throws the audience, because they feel like something's gone wrong, and then you lose the message and the emotion, because suddenly all you're getting is kind of anxiety and, oops, I've done it wrong. Whereas most people don't care. They don't care if it's wrong, right or wrong. You're right. I love that. Perfection is moving people. I'm going to keep that.
Yeah, well, I've come to that after many decades of torturing myself in other, trying to achieve perfection in other ways, and it hasn't worked. So I'm sticking with that one too, Penny.
Yes,
it's not about the demise of excellence.
No.
But it is, the recording industry has given us a very false expectation, and people have been able to replicate that through going to extraordinary lengths to achieve that kind of what they would call technical perfection. But I think in the space of life, when someone's born or somebody dies in our life, tell me someone who's going to care about that sort of perfection when they're listening. They're not. They just need that help and support from the music. And if the emotional content of the music is there, we've met that person's need.
Yeah, I often think that about live recordings of operas, which are often terrible quality old live recordings, but they're incredibly moving and riveting in a way that the perfectly positioned studio ones where everything's been tweaked and cut and pasted, and so there's nothing out of place. They're lovely, but yes, they're not. They don't get you in the same way as a live recording does.
And I think what we're really talking about here is a quality of
or a live performance.
Well, for a live performance, but we're also talking about this experience of music being a reflective space rather than watching it. Otherwise, it's a bit like watching gladiators. Are they going to get through unscathed? Are they going to get run over by the chariot, or are they going to jump out of the way in time? That's the sort of drama of like a car chase in a cop movie. But really, the thing that drew us into music in the first place is this beautiful reflective space, and I think that's to some extent with this perfectionism we've been talking about through the advent of the recording industry. It means that has become marginalised, and this other idea of perfection has taken its place. And I think when you're listening to those old recordings, because I have exactly the same experience, Penny, I listen to Caruso or some of those old singers, and it's scratchy. You can hardly even, there's as much scratch on those record as there is on the recording as there is music. But the emotion is really, really present, and I think our lives are crammed. Most people's lives now, kids especially, crammed so much they don't even grow up with that space. Growing up, I had that space all the time, and I really feel for this generation.
Yes, not much downtime. That's for sure. Oh, anyway, look, I should probably stop because it's time. Christopher Dyson is in the building, but it's wonderful to talk to you as ever. I'm talking to Rupert Guenther, and his world premiere national tour kicks off on the 30th of June at Government House in Perth. So get your tickets for that. Where are the tickets, actually, Rupert?
Tickets are at Ticketek.
Ticketek, wonderful.
Most of our concerts across Australia have got that, but certainly for Perth. Yeah, and thank you for having me on the show, and thank you. I've really enjoyed our conversation today. Yes. Again, it was a lovely improvisation. See, we did it.
It was, yes. Talking I will give you. Improvised singing, I think I would be there going, that sounds nice, Penny. Though, yeah, do that. Great. I'd be self-censoring like God knows what. So, but anyway, it's something to work towards, isn't it?
We can take that further over a cup of tea sometime.
We can. So if you would like to search New Letters to Esterhazy, Esther as you would imagine, the name Hazy, Hazy, all one word, then you will get to Ticketek and you'll be able to buy tickets for that. Lovely to talk to you, Rupert, and best of luck with the tour.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Penny. Thanks for having me on the show.
My pleasure.